Hey everyone, Dan here. Hey, I've been getting a ton of questions lately about how to edit out what you don't want in a photograph and how to make the decision as to what to edit out and maybe even what to add, because this is actually a perfect example of something needing to be added too. So let's pretend that this is a photograph that you shot from. It could be a landscape or a figure or whatever. And there's some obvious things that need to be edited out, like that, of course, all of this extra stuff that I have set up here for when I was working on setting up this still life, right? And obviously, the stuff that you don't want or doesn't need to be in the painting has to be edited out. But the next, I don't think that's really the core of that question. I think the core of that question lies in the composition. In other words, when we look at something and we like it, how do we decide what's important and what is unimportant in the painting, right? And first off, of course, the most obvious answer is going to be the things that you like the most, or the things that are the most important and need to stay. The things you like the least are the things that you would have a tendency to edit out, right? I mean, that is, it kind of comes down to that, in its simplest terms. Now, in the next aspect of that, though, then you need to look at eye path and eye flow. Like, for example, right here, as you see, there's this huge missing spot. The whole thing does not feel balanced. In fact, so let's go to a picture where I have it cropped. Okay, so there's the cropped version where I've kind of cropped out some of the stuff, right? Now, of course, all of this needs to go, and this needs to go. But if you notice here, it feels unbalanced. Now, because of this greenery and this thing here, it actually helps to balance this. But if I was to get rid of that, you would feel like the whole thing was kind of heavy over onto this side. So that's the very first thing you have to decide is what needs to be done in order to balance the painting. That's the first thing you need to decide. Because until you get the balance part figured out, you're going to always have that part nagging at you. So, how can I do this? I was just going to show you it. We could just take, well, I'll just show you in Photoshop here, okay? We'll just take this into Photoshop, give you kind of an idea what I'm talking about. Let's zoom in here. So let's say that this is a bad space, right? So you have to bear with this. This is going to be kind of hokey what I'm going to do here, but let's just say that we're going to grab this stuff here, Control C, and then Control L to drop it back in. And then we're just going to kind of drop it over here. Okay. And then that's what I'm kind of thinking of in terms of balance. Sorry, now I have to get rid of that blinking liner. It'll make me crazy. Okay. Now see how that feels a lot more balanced than it did before. The lighting's all wrong and everything like that, but at least now there's some sort of a sense of balance to the whole thing, right? So that's the first thing that you need to resolve, right? Okay, so let's get back to our picture, or I guess maybe I can finish from here. The next thing you have to decide is what is important and what is unimportant. Like some of these leaves in here, like pretty much a lot of these leaves in here are pretty important. Not all of these are important, however, right? These two flowers are very important. How you move around is important. But see, there's kind of a dead spot. It doesn't have really good flow to this. So maybe if you were to move some of the bright down in here, it would have good flow in those terms. Let's get back to the original picture now. If I can find it here. There's the original picture. So it doesn't have good flow. So we want to maybe move things around to make it have good flow. And so we would maybe move some of these light flowers here. And if you look at these flowers right here, they're kind of dead right there. So I would need to replace those with live flowers. I didn't happen to have any at the time, but I did have a picture of some live flowers. So there you go. So I will use this picture kind of as a substitute for that. In fact, I think those used to be the same flowers and they had just died. You know how it is, you have flowers and they don't last that long. and I wanted to try this different setup. I had tried a bunch of different setups, as you can tell from all of the stuff that I had in here. Bunch of different things trying to come up with something I thought was really interesting. And I wanted to ultimately get something that was kind of arty, and I'll show you here, with all this kind of abstract stuff down here and abstract background. So you can see here how I brought stuff over here to balance it, but I moved the white flowers in such a way to make it have a little bit more flow. This is unfortunately not a really good photograph. The color is a little bit too weird. It's like intense in spots and not in others. The base is too bright and doesn't have a feeling of contour. But nonetheless, you're going to get the idea here. But let's get back to the demo, or back to this here. So what I was trying to do then is have a compelling enough center of interest here. So that it kind of works into this whole thing too. Not only are we trying to come up with what to leave, what to add into to balance, but what to move around, but then ultimately what we can leave out. Like obviously some of these leaves are nice and beautiful. This one's probably a little bit too bright, so that needs to be modified, right? And the way I know that is I'm deciding when I have my center of interest down here, how I want the eye to flow through the painting. I definitely want the eye to flow around those irises. I don't necessarily want those to be the end all of the painting. If I did, I would put more light behind them to make them stand out. So I'd take this and maybe put it here, maybe some more light ones behind it so that they would stand out. But I really want to have a relationship of the light on the vase to the whiter and the lighter purple flowers. That's really what I'm going for with this. But the secret, I think, is in the editing process, and I think this is really key because I get this question so often, is kind of having a vision in your head as to what you want the eye to do in the painting. Okay, like I want it to come in, I want to see flowers, bounce around, ultimately come back in here, get caught, maybe look at some interesting stuff on the tabletop and move through the painting. So that was kind of my intent when I sat down to paint this. And I wanted to do, in this particular painting, I wanted to do some cool abstract arty stuff with the tabletop. And as you can see, there's some dry brushing in here, and I think that was kind of fun and cool, and it makes the painting have a little bit looser feel. I wanted to have some kind of cool colors in the background, although they're not really anywhere near this intense. So anyway, that's how you make this decision as to what to put in and what to leave out, by looking at it, the setup, because you're never going to set up a perfect setup. At least most likely you're not. Maybe if it's super simple or something. Every painting is going to require some sort of editing in terms of elimination and addition. And I think that as long as you have a clear understanding before you begin what it is you want to do, it's really quite easy to do that. And you could imagine this if this was a landscape or a cityscape, particularly a cityscape. You know, you decide where do you want the viewer to spend its time, or what do you want to paint? What's exciting to you about it? And then you move the eye around in that way. And pretty much everything else is either painted down, meaning less color, less value, less edges, or it is eliminated. All right. I think that's a pretty important tip. So you might want to hear that one a couple times. Anyway, thanks a lot. Have a great day.